The announcement came with the weight of 1,000 heartbreaks, a moment when the entertainment world collectively held its breath and felt the ground shift beneath their feet. Bruce Willis, the man whose name had been synonymous with resilience, with that trademark smirk and unshakable courage, was stepping away from the career that had defined him for nearly 4 decades. The initial diagnosis of aphasia sent shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond, but few could have anticipated the even more devastating revelation that would follow. This was not just a story about a celebrity facing illness. It was the beginning of a long goodbye, a farewell that would unfold slowly and painfully, stripping away the very essence of the man millions had come to love and admire. At 70 years old, Bruce Willis finds himself in a battle unlike any he ever faced in the movies. There are no explosions he can outrun, no villains he can outwit, no clever one-liners that can save him this time. The diagnosis of frontotemporal dementia brought with it a cruel and irreversible reality, one that steals not just memory, but identity itself, piece by agonizing piece. The man who once commanded the screen with effortless charisma, who made audiences believe that one person could take on impossible odds and win, now faces an opponent that cannot be defeated. His family watches helplessly as the father, husband, and friend they cherish gradually fades, even as his physical presence remains. Fans around the world grapple with the painful truth that their hero is vulnerable after all, that the strength they admired in him was always, at its core, profoundly human. This is more than just another celebrity health story cycling through the news. This is the emotional unraveling of a legacy, the tender and heartbreaking farewell of a man who gave everything to entertain, inspire, and move audiences across generations. Bruce Willis did not simply act in movies. He inhabited roles that became cultural touchstones, performances that shaped how we understand courage, humor, and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. Now, as his own story reaches its most difficult chapter, there is a poignant symmetry in watching him face his final challenge with the same quiet strength that defined his most memorable characters. The difference is that this time, there will be no Hollywood ending, no miraculous recovery, no triumphant music swelling as the credits roll. There's only love, memory, and a gradual acceptance of an inevitable goodbye. Bruce Willis entered this world on March 19, 1955, in a place that seems almost poetically distant from the Hollywood hills where he would eventually make his mark. Idar-Oberstein, a small town in West Germany, was where his American father David served as a soldier and where his German mother Marlene worked tirelessly to provide for their young family. The post-war landscape of Germany was still bearing the scars of conflict, and military families like the Willises represented a new chapter in transatlantic relations. When Bruce was just 2 years old, the family made the journey across the ocean to settle in Carneys Point, New Jersey, a working-class community where factory smoke mingled with determination and where people measured success not in fame or fortune, but in honest work and family stability. His father David took on physically demanding jobs as a welder and mechanic, coming home each night with the kind of exhaustion that comes from true labor. His mother Marlene found employment at a local bank, managing numbers and customers with the same quiet efficiency she brought to raising her children. They were people of modest means, but rich in values, instilling in Bruce the kind of grit and humility that would later make him relatable even as he became a global superstar. The Willis household was not one of privilege or connections. It was a place where hard work was understood as the only reliable path forward, where dreams were acknowledged but never assumed, where every achievement required effort and persistence. Growing up, Bruce faced a challenge that made every day feel like a small battlefield. He struggled with a stutter that turned simple conversations into exercises in frustration and embarrassment. Words would catch in his throat, syllables would tangle on his tongue, and the ease with which other children spoke seemed like a cruel gift he had been denied. For a boy growing up in a tough working-class town, any perceived weakness could become a target for teasing or worse. The stutter made Bruce feel isolated, different, less capable than his peers. It would have been easy for him to retreat into silence, to avoid speaking whenever possible, to let the impediment define and limit him. But something inside Bruce refused to accept that fate. When he joined the school drama club, something miraculous happened, something that would not only change his relationship with language, but would ultimately shape the entire trajectory of his life. The moment he stepped onto a stage, the moment he inhabited a character and spoke someone else's words within the framework of a performance, the stutter that plagued his everyday speech simply vanished. It was as though the act of becoming someone else freed him from the chains that bound his own voice. Acting became more than just a hobby or an extracurricular activity. It became a refuge, a place where Bruce Willis could finally speak with confidence and power. Teachers noticed his natural presence, the way he commanded attention without seeming to try, the charisma that lit up even the simplest school production. By his senior year, that shy stuttering boy had transformed into someone his classmates trusted and admired enough to elect him student council president. It was an unlikely journey from struggling to speak to leading his peers, but it foreshadowed the remarkable resilience that would define his entire life. After graduation, Bruce did not have a clear path to stardom waiting for him. There were no Hollywood connections in his family, No agents knocking on his door, no easy route from a New Jersey working-class background to the bright lights of Los Angeles. Instead, he took the jobs that were available, the kind of work that his father would have recognized and respected. He worked as a security guard at a nuclear power plant, surrounded by concrete and warning signs, spending long shifts watching monitors and making rounds. He drove workers to and from a chemical factory, navigating pre-dawn darkness and the tired faces of people heading to and from their shifts. At one point, he even worked as a private investigator, a job that would later seem eerily prescient given some of the detective roles he would play on screen. But through all of these jobs, all of these detours and delays, the pull of acting never faded. If anything, it grew stronger, more insistent, impossible to ignore. Bruce enrolled at Montclair State University to study drama, finally giving formal structure to the passion that had rescued him from his childhood stutter. But formal education felt too slow, too theoretical, too removed from the actual work of becoming an actor. He left college before completing his degree, a risky decision that terrified his parents but felt absolutely necessary to Bruce. If he was going to make it as an actor, he needed to be where the work was, where auditions happened, where dreams either came true or died trying. New York City in the late 1970s and early 80s was a place of grit and possibility, where young artists from all over the country descended with talent, ambition, and very little money. Bruce found work tending bar at a place in Hell's Kitchen, one of Manhattan's rougher neighborhoods, where the clientele was colorful and the tips were essential to making rent. He poured drinks and listened to stories, developing the kind of street-level understanding of human nature that would later inform his performances. Between shifts, he went to auditions, standing in lines with hundreds of other hopefuls, hearing no far more often than yes, learning to handle rejection as just another part of the process. It was grueling and uncertain, the kind of life that breaks most people who try it. But Bruce kept pushing forward, kept believing that his moment would come. When Bruce Willis landed the role of David Addison on the television series Moonlighting in 1985, he was competing against thousands of other actors, each one hoping to be the face of this new show about bickering private detectives. The chemistry between Bruce and his co-star Sybil Shepherd was electric from the first screen test, a crackling combination of wit, tension, attraction, and perfectly timed comedy. The show became a cultural phenomenon, blending mystery, romance, and humor in a way that felt fresh and exciting. Bruce's performance earned him both an Emmy Award and a Golden Globe, validating years of struggle and establishing him as one of television's brightest new stars. Suddenly, Bruce Willis was not just another actor hoping for a break. He was a household name, a face that viewers welcomed into their living rooms every week. Fame brought opportunities beyond acting. Bruce became the spokesperson for Seagram's wine coolers, his face appearing in commercials that reached millions and earning him substantial money. It was the kind of lucrative deal that most actors would protect at any cost. But when Bruce made the personal decision to quit drinking, he walked away from the endorsement. It was a rare moment of integrity in an industry where financial considerations usually trump personal values, a decision that revealed something essential about the man behind the famous smile. He valued authenticity and personal growth more than easy money, a principle that would guide him throughout his career, even as he became one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood. The leap from television star to movie icon came in 1988 with a film that would redefine the action genre and cement Bruce Willis as a true superstar. Die Hard was not supposed to be a game-changer. It was based on a novel that had already been rejected by several other actors, and the concept of setting an entire action film in a single building seemed limiting rather than innovative. But director John McTiernan and Bruce Willis saw something different in the story of John McClane, an ordinary New York cop who finds himself trapped in a Los Angeles skyscraper taken over by sophisticated terrorists. Bruce brought a vulnerability and humor to the role that action heroes rarely displayed. His McClane was not invincible. He bled, he made mistakes, he cracked jokes to mask his fear, and he genuinely seemed like a regular guy, thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Audiences around the world responded to that authenticity, to the bruised, everyman quality that made McClane feel real rather than cartoonish. The film was a massive success, launching a franchise that would span decades and establishing Bruce Willis as one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood. That same year, he demonstrated his versatility with roles in Blind Date, a romantic comedy, and in Country, a drama about Vietnam veterans. He even lent his voice to the talking baby in Look Who's Talking, showing a willingness to take risks and avoid being typecast that would serve him well throughout his career. Bruce Willis was not content to be just an action star. He wanted to be an actor in the fullest sense, someone who could move between genres and challenge audience expectations. The 1990s brought both spectacular triumphs and humbling failures, the kind of roller coaster that tests whether a star has real staying power or is just riding a temporary wave of popularity. Bruce continued the Die Hard franchise with successful sequels that proved McClane's appeal was not just a one-time phenomenon. He delivered one of his finest performances in Pulp Fiction, Quentin Tarantino's groundbreaking film, where Bruce played Butch Coolidge, a boxer who refuses to throw a fight. His understated intensity gave the film much of its moral gravity, proving that Bruce could hold his own alongside actors known primarily for dramatic work. The film became a cultural landmark and introduced Bruce to audiences who might have dismissed him as just another action star. But between these successes came films that critics savaged and audiences largely ignored. Hudson Hawk, a would-be action comedy that Bruce also produced, was a notorious flop that cost tens of millions and became a punchline in Hollywood. Color of Night, an erotic thriller, was similarly mocked despite eventually finding an audience on home video. These failures could have derailed a less resilient career, but Bruce weathered each setback with the same stoic humor that defined many of his characters. He kept working, kept taking chances, kept showing up. His persistence paid off with strong performances in films like 12 Monkeys, where he played a time traveler opposite Brad Pitt's manic mental patient, and The Fifth Element, Luc Besson's visually stunning science fiction epic where Bruce brought grounded humanity to a wildly imaginative universe. The blockbuster Armageddon in 1998 became one of the highest-grossing films of the year, with Bruce playing an oil driller tasked with saving Earth from an asteroid. Critics dismissed it as overwrought melodrama, but audiences embraced its emotional earnestness, and the film rescued Bruce's career from any lingering doubts about his box office appeal. In the 2000s and 2010s, Bruce became the grizzled veteran of action cinema, the actor who could bring gravitas and credibility to ensemble casts in genre films. He appeared in everything from the stylized violence of Sin City to the knowing humor of Red to the clever science fiction of Looper. He made a memorable guest appearance on the television show Friends, poked fun at his own image in a Comedy Central roast, and even surprised Broadway audiences with a dramatic turn in a stage production of Misery. His later years were filled with cameos, voice work, and nostalgic returns to franchises that had built his legend, including another Die Hard sequel that brought McClane to Russia. Bruce Willis had become an institution, a reliable presence whose very appearance in a film carried weight and expectation. Yet beneath all the bravado and box office success, there was always a reflective quality to Bruce, a sense that he understood how unlikely and miraculous his journey had been from that stuttering boy in New Jersey to Hollywood's ultimate tough guy. He carried his fame with a mixture of gratitude and weary acknowledgement that nothing lasts forever, that every career eventually winds down, that the applause always eventually stops. His story felt less like a simple rags-to-riches tale and more like a bittersweet meditation on ambition, resilience, and the fleeting nature of stardom. In March 2022, the entertainment world stopped in its tracks when Bruce Willis's family released a statement that shattered the carefully maintained image of the indestructible action hero. Bruce had been diagnosed with aphasia, a neurological condition that most people had never heard of, but that carries devastating implications for anyone whose livelihood depends on communication. Aphasia steals language. It traps thoughts inside a person's mind, leaving them unable to express what they're thinking or feeling. Bruce could still think, still understand on some level what was happening around him, but the words that had once flowed so naturally, the quick wit and easy charm that defined his public persona, were slipping away. For an actor, for someone whose entire career was built on delivering lines with perfect timing and emotional authenticity, the diagnosis was not just medically serious, it was existentially cruel. The world reacted with shock and sympathy, but the story was far from over. In early 2023, doctors provided an even more devastating update. Bruce was not simply dealing with aphasia as an isolated condition. He was suffering from frontotemporal dementia, a progressive and incurable disease that attacks the brain's frontal and temporal lobes. Unlike Alzheimer's disease, which primarily affects memory in its early stages, frontotemporal dementia targets language, behavior, personality, and eventually all cognitive function. It does not simply take memories. It dismantles the very essence of who a person is. There is no treatment that can stop or even significantly slow its progression. There is no hope of recovery. There is only the grim certainty of irreversible decline. Bruce's family could do nothing but watch as the man they loved began to disappear before their eyes. Not all at once, but gradually, in stages that each brought new losses and new grief. In December 2024, his ex-wife Demi Moore tried to offer some measure of comfort to worried fans by saying that Bruce was in stable condition. But that word stable hung in the air with uncomfortable ambiguity. Did stable mean he was holding steady, or did it simply mean the decline had reached a plateau before the next inevitable drop? Reports began to emerge, painting a much bleaker picture than the word stable suggested. Bruce could no longer form complete sentences, his ability to read had deteriorated significantly, and he struggled with basic physical movements that most people take for granted. The same man who had performed his own dangerous stunts in countless action films now needed assistance to walk across a room. His current wife, Emma Hemming Willis, opened up about the terrifying experience of watching Bruce's speech deteriorate, made worse by the fact that she initially misunderstood what was happening. Bruce had struggled with a stutter as a child, and when Emma began noticing changes in his speech patterns, she assumed it was that old childhood challenge resurfacing, perhaps triggered by stress or aging. She could not have imagined that she was witnessing the early stages of a devastating brain disease. By the time the true nature of his condition became clear, precious time had already been lost, though in truth there was nothing that could have been done to change the outcome. Emma also revealed something heartbreaking in its complexity. Bruce might not fully understand what is happening to him. He exists in a confusing liminal space, sometimes aware and present, other times distant and confused, caught between the man he was and the reality of what he is becoming. Emma has tried to fill his days with warmth and love, creating moments of connection even as the disease works to erase connection itself. But in August 2025, she made a decision that sparked intense public debate and criticism. She moved Bruce into a separate residence with 24-hour professional caregivers, a choice that some interpreted as abandonment, but that Emma explained as an act of love for their daughters, 12-year-old Mabel and 10-year-old Evelyn. She believed, and perhaps rightly, that Bruce would have wanted his girls to grow up in a home filled with normalcy, laughter, and the everyday chaos of childhood, not in a house shadowed by illness and decline. The decision tore Emma apart, transforming her identity from wife to something more complex and painful, a care partner navigating the impossible balance between being a mother to young children and supporting a husband who is gradually slipping away. Her daughters miss their father desperately. They miss the man who remembered their birthdays and school events, who was present and engaged in their lives, who showed them through small daily gestures that they were loved and valued. Now those memories are fading from Bruce, even as they remain vivid and painful for his daughters. And Emma worries constantly about how losing their father in this slow, incremental way will shape them for the rest of their lives. By July 2025, overwhelmed by rumors, speculation, and judgment from people who could not possibly understand the complexity of her situation, Emma spoke out publicly. She asked for compassion and understanding, reminding the world that behind every headline is a family clinging to love while learning to say goodbye, not all at once in a single devastating moment, but gradually, a little more with each passing day, in a process that never quite ends and never quite allows for closure. Bruce Willis's decline did not just shock his fans. It broke the hearts of those who knew him best and who now carry the burden of guilt and misunderstanding. His eldest daughter, Tallulah Willis, later revealed how she had completely misread the early signs of her father's illness. Before anyone in the family understood what was really happening, Tallulah interpreted Bruce's growing silence and emotional distance as a personal rejection. She thought her father had become uninterested in her life, that he no longer cared about her struggles or achievements, that his love had somehow diminished. The pain of feeling abandoned by her father was compounded later by the crushing guilt of realizing he had not been pulling away by choice, but had been in the grip of a disease that was stealing his ability to connect. Tallulah now speaks openly about that painful misunderstanding, using her experience to remind others how crucial it is to communicate, to ask questions, to not assume we understand what is happening in someone else's mind. Sometimes love is hidden behind illness, obscured by symptoms that look like indifference but are actually suffering. Through all of this heartbreak and confusion, Bruce's family has remained remarkably close and unified. His ex-wife Demi Moore, with whom he shares 3 daughters, has stayed deeply involved in his care and in family gatherings. She often shares photos on social media that show a family choosing love over bitterness, connection over separation, collective support over individual pain. These images of birthdays and holidays reveal a modern family in the best sense, one that has transcended divorce and ego to focus on what matters most. On Bruce's 70th birthday, they all came together for a celebration that was undoubtedly bittersweet, marking a milestone that Bruce himself may not have fully understood but that his family needed to honor. These moments prove that while Bruce's memory and cognitive abilities may be fading, the love that surrounds him has not diminished. It has only grown more intentional, more precious, more fiercely protected. But the signs of Bruce's struggle were visible long before his family's public announcement, evident to anyone who was paying close attention during the final years of his active career. Between 2018 and 2022, Bruce appeared in more than 20 films, an astonishing output that at first seemed like the work ethic of a prolific actor, but that later revealed itself to be something more troubling. These were not the high-budget blockbusters or prestigious projects that had defined his peak years. They were mostly low-budget, quickly produced films designed to capitalize on his name recognition. Bruce could earn millions of dollars for just a few days of work, a financial arrangement that benefited both him and the producers who could market a movie as a Bruce Willis film regardless of its actual quality. Behind the scenes, however, crew members were noticing disturbing changes. Bruce was having trouble remembering his lines, even short, simple ones. He struggled to understand directions or follow basic cues that any experienced actor should handle effortlessly. His responses sometimes seemed disconnected from what was happening around him, as though he was present physically but not quite mentally engaged. On the set of a film called Hard Kill in 2020, co-star Lala Kent witnessed a frightening incident when Bruce fired a prop gun at the wrong moment. Not once but twice. Fortunately, no one was injured, but the incident rattled everyone on set and raised serious questions about safety and Bruce's cognitive state. From that point forward, crew members quietly worked to protect Bruce, simplifying his scenes, reducing his dialogue, using earpieces to feed him lines, doing whatever they could to help him get through his days of filming without embarrassment or incident. One insider bluntly admitted that they had to make Bruce look good, that he was essentially being puppet through his performances. The image that phrase conjures is heartbreaking. The once commanding presence of Bruce Willis, now guided through scenes he could no longer fully grasp or execute on his own. On the set of a film called Midnight in the Switchgrass, director Randall Emmett reportedly struggled to get Bruce to perform simple physical actions like kicking down a door. Even with an earpiece feeding him lines and directions, confusion clouded Bruce's face, and those working with him described him as appearing lost and disoriented. Some crew members reported that Bruce would sometimes ask why he was there, a question that revealed not just confusion about the scene, but perhaps a deeper existential bewilderment about his purpose and situation. Rumors began to circulate that some filmmakers continued hiring Bruce despite being aware of his cognitive decline, prioritizing profit over compassion. His name alone could turn a modest production into a financially viable product, and insiders claimed that certain producers ignored the obvious signs of his deteriorating condition because a Bruce Willis movie would still generate sales and revenue. Some directors and producers, however, reached a moral breaking point. Mike Burns and Jesse V. Johnson, among others, later stated that they refused to work with Bruce again once they understood what was happening, realizing that the cost of exploiting his condition was too high, not financially, but ethically and morally. This raises a painful question that cuts to the heart of the entertainment industry's values. Why did no one stop it sooner? Perhaps Bruce himself wanted to continue working, unable to accept that his career was over or finding purpose and identity in the familiar routines of filmmaking. Perhaps those closest to him did not yet fully grasp the seriousness of his condition, misinterpreting symptoms as fatigue or stress rather than neurological disease. Or perhaps in an industry built on relentless momentum, where careers are currency and stopping means irrelevance, no one knew how to say enough, how to prioritize a person's well-being over productivity and profit. For decades, Bruce's career had been built on extraordinary endurance, on pushing through exhaustion and pain to deliver the performances audiences expected. The explosions, the stunts, the physical demands, the long nights, and grueling schedules all took their toll. Medical experts are careful to note that frontotemporal dementia is not caused by overwork or stress, but they also acknowledge that constant stress can accelerate cognitive decline in those already predisposed to such conditions. Bruce gave everything to his craft, his energy, his body, his focus, his time, all in service of entertaining millions of people around the world. Now the lights have dimmed, the cameras have stopped rolling, and the hero who spent his career saving others is the one being saved and cared for by his family. There are no rewrites or retakes available this time. No clever script revisions that can change the outcome. Only love, memory, and the quiet courage required to let go gradually and with grace. Frontotemporal dementia, the disease that has silenced Bruce Willis and stolen so much of who he was, remains one of the most mysterious and poorly understood neurological conditions affecting humans. Unlike Alzheimer's disease, which typically strikes older individuals and primarily affects memory in its early stages, frontotemporal dementia often appears in people in their 50s and 60s, affecting language, behavior, personality, and emotional regulation before eventually progressing to more global cognitive impairment. It robs its victims not of their past first, but of their present, not of memory, but of the ability to process language, to understand social cues, to regulate emotions, to maintain the personality traits that make them recognizable to those who love them. Because frontotemporal dementia is relatively rare compared to Alzheimer's, research funding and scientific attention lag far behind, leaving families with few resources and little hope. But in March 2023, scientists at the University of Sheffield announced a potential breakthrough that offered a glimmer of hope, even if that hope comes too late for Bruce himself. Researchers developed a nasal spray that in early studies showed promise in slowing or potentially preventing certain forms of frontotemporal dementia. The treatment is still years away from human trials, and even if it proves effective, it will arrive far too late to help Bruce reverse or even stabilize his decline. But for his daughters, particularly his younger daughters Mabel and Evelyn, who may carry genetic risk factors for the disease, this research represents the possibility that they might be protected from the same cruel fate that has stolen their father. Medical science often advances one painful lesson at a time, and Bruce's very public struggle has brought attention and urgency to a condition that has lived too long in obscurity. Today, Bruce Willis is 70 years old, and his condition is described as stable, a word that feels simultaneously comforting and heartbreaking. Stable means he is not declining rapidly at this moment, that the disease has not suddenly accelerated into its most aggressive phases, but it also means he is not improving, that there is no recovery on the horizon, that he exists in a fragile equilibrium that could shift at any time. He lives in what can only be described as a state of in-between, where pieces of the man his family knew still occasionally flicker through, moments of recognition or connection that feel like precious gifts, but the light grows dimmer with each passing month. Emma Hemming Willis continues to serve as what she calls his care partner, a term that acknowledges she is more than a traditional caregiver, but also no longer his wife in the conventional sense, bound together now by responsibility, history, and a love that has been transformed by tragedy into something both beautiful and unbearably sad. Their daughters Mabel and Evelyn visit their father regularly at his care facility, still trying to bring laughter and normalcy into rooms that are now mostly quiet. His ex-wife Demi Moore and their older daughters Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah continue to show up for birthdays, holidays, and small family moments that outsiders might consider insignificant, but that carry enormous weight for those who love Bruce. Despite everything, despite the disease and the decisions and the inevitable losses still to come, the family remains united and committed. They are bound together not by obligation or guilt, but by a love that refuses to fade, a love that adapts and persists even as the person at its center becomes less and less recognizable. Behind all the headlines and public speculation lies a truth that the world too often overlooks or misunderstands. This is not a story of abandonment or failure or family dysfunction. This is a story of endurance and adaptation, of a wife trying to balance the needs of young children with the demands of caring for a husband who is disappearing, of daughters mourning a father who is still physically present but emotionally and cognitively absent, of an ex-wife who could have walked away years ago but who chose instead to remain part of a family, united by something stronger than marriage certificates or legal obligations. Each member of Bruce's family hold a fragment of who he was, protecting his memory and his dignity even as those things fade from his own consciousness. They are living through a unique kind of grief, one that does not come all at once, but arrives in waves and increments, demanding constant adjustment and acceptance. For Bruce Willis, the man who once embodied cinematic strength and invincibility, who ran into explosions and faced down villains, and always found a way to survive, this final chapter of his life is painfully and profoundly human. His farewell to the world is not the dramatic exit of a movie scene, not accompanied by swelling music or heroic last words. It is slow, quiet, achingly tender, and utterly lacking in the control or agency that defined his screen persona. One by one, his abilities have fallen away like autumn leaves. First his command of language, then his comprehension of complex ideas, then his physical freedom and independence. What remains is something both devastating and beautiful, the pure and fragile love that surrounds him, the memories he created through decades of work that will outlast his own ability to recall them, and the courage of those who care for him day after day, choosing presence and connection even when those gestures may not be fully understood or returned. As fans and admirers, we have the opportunity to honor Bruce Willis not merely by rewatching his films or sharing clips of his greatest moments, though those acts of remembrance have their place. We can honor him more meaningfully by learning from his journey, by advocating for increased research funding for frontotemporal dementia and related neurological conditions, by supporting organizations dedicated to raising awareness and providing resources for affected families, by having honest and open conversations about brain health and cognitive decline, especially within industries like entertainment that too often demand silence about vulnerability until crisis forces disclosure. We can also demand meaningful change within Hollywood itself, pushing for better protections for aging actors, clearer ethical boundaries when health concerns arise, more compassionate policies that prioritize human well-being over productivity and profit, and greater support for those struggling behind the camera's glare, away from public view. Bruce Willis taught multiple generations what it meant to be a hero, not through perfection or invincibility, but through persistence, humor, vulnerability, and the determination to keep fighting even when the odds seemed impossible. Now his legacy extends beyond the films themselves. It lives in the love that surrounds him during his darkest days, in the awareness his story has brought to a previously obscure disease, in the conversations his family's openness has sparked about caregiving and grief, and the many forms that courage can take. His story reminds us that true heroism sometimes looks less like running into danger, and more like simply holding on, staying present, choosing love over and over again, even as everything familiar slips away. Bruce Willis gave us decades of entertainment and inspiration. Now, in his silence and struggle, he offers us something equally valuable, a reminder of our shared humanity, our universal vulnerability, and the fierce, beautiful power of love that persists even when recognition fades.